Okay, Duane, over to you.
Greetings. I would like to extend my appreciation to the Moya University for the opportunity to share with all of you today, with special mention to our technical crew, Mr. Mike, BL, and Rose, and of course, all of you who have taken your valuable time to spend with us and participate. So we're going to go through a few introductory quotes by the Tibetan and a few images, and then a little later in the presentation, I'm going to open it up for any questions or comments. And this is particularly important when we get to the animation part of this presentation, which is really the heart and soul of it. We want a good, firm mental base from which to launch into the abstract mind and the intuition, and that will give it to us. Are there anyone who would like to read this first quote by the Tibetan?
I'll read that for you.
Thank you.
Importance of symbols. All that it will be possible for us to do in this section will be to impart the truth in three ways. Through the illumination of the student's mind as he studies the stanzas of Zon, which will be found at the commencement of the treatise. Secondly, through the realization that will come to the student as he correlates and ponders upon the various occult fragments found scattered through the pages. Thirdly, through the consideration of the various charts and word pictures, which will be found also scattered through the treatise. The student of the new era will approach much that he has yet to master through the medium of the eye, learning thereby to appreciate and solve that which is presented to him in the form of lines and diagrams. All is symbol, and these symbols must be mastered.
Thank you, BL.
Can I say
Please.
wow?
It's
Wow.
an excellent quote, and we have to keep in mind that HPB and DK has affirmed this, that there's 7 levels to every symbol, and each student or disciple will unlock that mystery according to their level of development. So if 2 or 3 people come up with a somewhat different interpretation, that does not necessarily mean that one or other of them are incorrect. Sort of like looking at a sphere when you're sitting in a semicircular situation and you're looking at reality from your unique ray and astrological perspective. So what we're going to do here to begin with is a brief recapitulation on the theory and the idea of triangles. We've added information on the triangles at every presentation, but it's so important, a little repetition and then adding new and different insights into that amazing occult science will be shared. So reading the next quote, this you can now do, and you can form thus the nucleus of that great interwoven pattern of light and of goodwill which must underlie or substand all exoteric work of renovation, renewal, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. I ask you and other disciples, therefore, again to work with renewed interest at the forming of triangles, reaching people who are already active and seek to aid them in forming new triangles. This is a work of major importance and has the endorsement of the hierarchy. Now, we know from our studies in the ageless wisdom and the works of the Tibetan that a triangle has three sides and three individuals link and circulate healing light onto themselves, the groups with which they work, and most importantly, onto a planetary level. So taking that as a basic statement, let's see how a square is by crossing a horizontal line, and it can be a diagonal one if the square is positioned differently, how we take a square and we make two triangles. And that these two triangles, according to the Tibetan, are far more potent than a square. That the planet is surrounded with an etheric grid of squares, which is preventing light from spiritual disciples, the new group of world servers, triangle workers, and even the masters from pouring in their redemptive fire onto the planet. So everyone is needed in some way to do this very important and advanced work. Now, taking this square and creating two triangles, DK has this to say, which will lead us into some very interesting and potent realms. The star of life. This is done by the creation of division, by the application of directed motion and the appearance of two triangles in the place of the one square. When this has taken place, which we just demonstrated, the perceiving consciousness recognizes identity and the rule of the square is ended. These words were once spoken to me by an ancient seer who bisected the square esoterically, thus forming two triangles and uniting them in a fresh manifestation to form a star of life. Ponder on this. So from the square to a triangle to two triangles and then two triangles superimposed over each other, we come up with this symbol. And we've all been exposed to this in so many different ways. I need not go into it in any great depth other than say that it's the symbol of the upper triad and the lower triad fusing, of the divine masculine and feminine fusing. It's been often referred to as the Seal of Solomon, the Morgan David glyph, or the Merkaba. And we have to keep in mind that all of these geometric forms are in motion. So here we have two tetrahedrons fused together to make a sort of a three-dimensional Merkaba rather than a lineal two-dimension Merkaba. And when we extend this to the next slide, we see how the upper triad and the lower triad of each individual disciple is situated on the inner planes. Now, granted, each disciple has their own ray monad, it has their own soul ray, and it has their own personality ray with its three lower rays: the mind, the lower mind, the emotions, and the personality. And as you look at this image titled the monad, you can see that in the middle is the egoic lotus. And the egoic lotus is offered as an intermediary between the one monadic life that's cut off from us down here as personalities. So we're going to go into the egoic lotus in greater detail, but just a picture of why the tetrahedron, why the star of life, and why the Merkaba are very, very important. Here's another quote by the Tibetan. Would anyone like to volunteer to read it?
I can read it. The secret of the fire lies hid in the second letter of the sacred word, Aum. The mystery of life is concealed within the heart. When the lower point vibrates, when the sacred triangle glows, when the point, the middle center, and the apex connect and circulate the fire, when the threefold apex likewise burns, then the two triangles, the greater and the lesser, merge into the one flame which burneth up the whole.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, this is a graphic demonstration or rendition of what we just read. And taking DK's suggestion that if we can see visually certain symbols, they can be more often assimilated more easily, at least with second ray types, than just text. You have the A symbolizing the father, the monad, and I'm just speaking in general terms here. The U is the soul, the divine intermediary that we just viewed. And the M is the personality or the mother aspect. And only when those three come together do we have initiation of one type or another, or at a later stage, full revelation, transfiguration. So what we're going to see next, and then we're going to open it up to questions and sharing, is this image that Justin Wilkinson rendered with his skills as a computer artist. And then it'll go, as you're watching this video, it'll go from one type of radiation to actually a more simplified one, in which you will see the upper and the lower triangle as one composite organism in movement. And then we'll discuss it. Okay, excellent. Take a deep breath and use all of these animations as mini meditations. It's not how long you meditate, it's your intention, the depth of your focus. Excellent. Once again, we have to understand that the Tibetans' works, and this is true of all of the different ageless wisdom contributors, they were historically hindered and limited, and it's our part in this more modern technological age to take these ancient truths and somehow make them more accessible. To see the upper and lower triads, like we just viewed with that blue dual vortex, clearly demonstrates the seamlessness, the order, the rhythm. It's often easy to get lost in the minutia unless you can see where the occult tidbits are moving towards or alluding to. Okay, excellent. I'd like to open up
Okay.
the group to any questions or comments.
Okay, I just wanted to say Michael Stacy typed in there, this last animation might be described as a symbol for the law of evolution.
That's beautiful. The law of evolution, involution, evolution, Manvantari, Pralaya, the great in-breath and out-breath. Excellent, Michael. Thank you.
He also had put earlier an effective thought, which is an expression of will.
Yes, the importance of how thought with focused intention can lead to the potency and the revelation of will.
Hi, Duane.
And then,
That first comment was in reference to the square being bisected by a line,
Okay, sorry,
which
but it's equally true. Thank you.
yes.
and then Heidi's got her hand up. Go ahead, Heidi.
Thank you. I was taking the teachings in that DK was giving and about the eyes, and our pupils are empty. And when you're looking at especially the moving symmetry of the animated view that you just showed, if one allows that to penetrate through, at first when I was looking at it and I was looking, it was like I was looking down and I was like, oh, actually seeing the brain and the ventricles, and it was really quite interesting. But then I shifted and let it come into a different viewing station, and when I did that, I could actually see that teaching that he gives about learning how to work with these symbols is, it has to do with being able to actually hold them and project them, and um, and and those visuals that you gave allow the organism or the ordering to happen by viewing them, and then it begins to take that form itself just through its nature, through its naturalness. But that was just what was coming to me, and I thought I would share it in this group.
Well, that was nothing less than profound. You have just summarized beautifully how each of us must interface with these symbols, be creative, look at them from different directions, step into them, be daring, as Michael Robbins would say, become them, become the symbol, because our personalities are a symbol of an even greater symbol. And as each level is penetrated, a greater understanding occurs and the symbols change. And then ultimately you end with just pure light, or if you prefer, pure darkness in Shambhala. Thank you. That was beautiful, beautiful. Anyone else like to share?
Yeah, we have another hand up, but I just wanted to make a comment myself. Um, what she said just reminded me of what DK tells us. And, as we go into meditation and we raise our consciousness, from the physical through the astral to the mental and to the higher mental, what we're doing when we get to the soul is we're looking down from a totally different perspective. And that's, what she was describing was to me that new perspective that we hadn't looked at before, that then just shift everything for us. So I just wanted to add that
That
comment
is
in there.
excellent, BL. Thank you. That is such an important insight. Anyone
And
else?
then Barbara's got her hand up. Go ahead, please, Barbara.
Yes, I could see the interaction of the planes and the subplanes, and that some of the Atmic is in the as a subplane in the principles. I'm wondering where the force of the monad fits into this.
Well, the difficulty lies in the fact that we're speaking about levels of consciousness and we're trying to symbolize them, but that is not the thing itself. And if we regress just for a second here back, I'll give you an idea. Okay, the point, the black dot within the circle of manifestations is symbolic of the will of the Father, of Shambhala, and it is unknown, unrecognized, but it through the descent of Fohat or cosmic electricity, it galvanizes, like you were sharing, all the rays and planes, and they are the tessellation, they are the matrix in which evolution on the material planes goes forth. So thank you for that comment. That was excellent. Okay, any additional comments or shares before we go to the next slide? And
That's all I see right now.
let me just say this. It's a wonderful thing if a person can formulate verbally what they're experiencing, but not everyone can articulate on what they're experiencing. Often you can feel heat in your centers, you can feel a new vibration, and you may not be able to articulate it with the exact words that you might want, but that does not infer that you haven't been impressed by it and that it hasn't had its powerful effect. Okay, excellent. Now, we're continuing with this idea of the star of life, which we've outlined, and that is superimposed the tetrahedron in the background, or the star of life, or the Merkaba. I have superimposed a dodecahedron. And in the ancient wisdom teachings, the dodecahedron is a symbol of the Buddhic plane. It's a symbol of the fires of love. And it's sort of a step down version of the second ray. Remembering now, you got the 246 line of what is referred to as the feminine line of descent. Now, one of the things that I've tried to do working with the Tibetans material is to interface it with Agni Yoga teachings. And there are some differences, obviously, but there are some similarities. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you just a little bit of information on the dodecahedron, which is a 12-sided figure, and you can place a perfect pentagram on each side. 12 we know is a magical number. 5 is a magical number. 5 times 12 is 60. And this is what a dodecahedron looks like. And here's the quote by Agni Yoga that we're going to use. The combination of two dodecahedrons is useful for promoting the rhythm of fire. Agni Yoga 361. So you see two dodecahedrons there, and what I did is I made mirror images of those two dodecahedrons. Opposite colors, opposite facing geometry. And then the one on the bottom, which is the combination of these two dodecahedrons, is the result of this superimposition. So the beauty of this type of presentation is that anyone can go back into the Moya school, university, and find the presentation and use it as a point of focus. You don't have to unlock the full mystery or secrets, obviously, of our quick presentation. So what you're going to see next is, and I'm going to bring it up, what you're looking at there is a dodecahedron that is in a state of animation that I've frozen just temporarily here before we actually get into the animation of it. And what it does, we have to understand that in sacred geometry, everything is made up of the Platonic solids. Now, these Platonic solids, they fuse and they integrate into each other in a way that is impossible to describe without actually looking at an animation. A few frames back, we showed how the dodecahedron faces perfectly into the tetrahedron. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to see the about 10 different types of Platonic solids all revolving, but basically under the major influence of the tetrahedron and the dodecahedron, or what I would say is the 5 and the 6. So take a deep breath, relax, and just be open to any impressions that you get from this next video. Excellent.
Michael
Would any,
says the one life with a diversity of expressions.
yes, the one life in diversity. Beautiful, Michael. Thank you. Anyone else like to comment?
Heidi, go ahead, please.
I just feel a wow, and and my wow has to do with really this recognition of how I wrote a bunch of notes, but it was just so much was coming in by looking at it. But it was just being able to see how the chemistry of matter is when it's starts to fire off. Like I could actually feel the firing of my brain shifting and changing. And as it was doing it, I was just aware of how the chemistry of our being changes. And really that to me was all about how joy is formulated in the midst of suffering by not being stuck in a particular patterning and allowing the pattern to change and not hold it in that square, when you were talking about the square, but allowing it to actually formulate and mobilize. And I just felt like that whole picture of what appears like a molecule that is changing itself in it's constantly revealing and constantly showing that it can change. And two things came to me, which was one, alleviating the fear of death, because one actually sees the continuance of life through change, and the magnificence of the of life recreating itself, how absolutely spectacular it is. So I feel vitalized actually by that. And it gave me another understanding of what the alchemical process is in mantra use, in many ways that are taught in the ancient wisdom. But it just showed how it actually, what it looks like I could see it. So thank you, and wow.
That was an awesome share. And
Okay.
go ahead.
Sorry, no, you finish.
And I appreciate the fact that these comments are taped because they are so rich and so important. And it requires us who are visually sitting, watching this animation or video to translate it up onto the higher astral plane, the higher mental, because that is when you symbolically knock on the door of the intuition. And it happens in stages, and yet it can happen simultaneous. And that's a beautiful paradox to review in our minds. And the intuition does lead to wholeness, to unconditional love, to a sense of freedom, and a resurrection out of the tomb of matter. It defies death. The real self laughs at death because it knows all the lower instruments are just shadows. So thank you, Heidi. That was excellent.
Okay, Neresa's got her hand up, but hold on just 1 minute there, please. I wanted to say that we have a couple of chats. Let me see. Anne says, how the many become the one.
Yes, beautiful.
And Diana says, dodeca is synthesis of all elements.
Yes, through love.
Okay,
Beautiful.
Nisa, go ahead, please.
Oh, yeah. I don't usually be able to articulate a lot, but what I came to me was the soul mantra just kept cycling through my head during the whole thing. And B, I can still, it's still, the image is still going for me. And it was like my whole head and the third eye, there was a lot of pressure there, so that was kind of all I had, just to share.
Excellent. Thank you. These symbols, some of these symbols and animations I did not create. Many of them I did. But I can tell you from 50 years of working with divine geometry, these are symbols that the hierarchy is attempting to impress upon humanity at this time. I'm not in any way inferring this work that I'm doing is exclusive. It is not. All of you are doing this in some way or form to make the teachings attractive, not just because they're colorful, but because they present for the first time to large groups of people something closer to the real thing. I always say if words are 2 steps away from the real thing, then symbols, again, remembering the 7 levels, is only 1 step away when you learn to unlock it. And it will impress itself upon you. In fact, I have a mantra that goes with that. And thank you for the idea of the soul mantra, because that is such a perfect analogy. One day I was looking at this and it's just like this mantra dropped into me, and it said, I will open you. And it wasn't like me, it was sort of like a soul's impulse. And it was like, it was saying, you cannot run, you cannot hide, I will open you. And there's a beauty, and yet there can be a moment of what I call psychic vertigo, where when you leave the lower mind, and we never want to destroy the lower mind, but when we leave largely its moorings and enter into the higher mind or the intuition, it can be like walking along a street corner and you're paying attention to something up there, maybe a beautiful bird flying by, and you step off the curb and there's this moment of, whoa, and then your foot hits the ground, you know you're safe, you're on firm ground, and away you go. But that can happen when you are exposed to advanced symbols. So thank you. Any additional comments or from chat?
Yes. Martine says, what I saw in the animation was a door opening.
Yes, that is what initiation is. It's the opening of a door and a stepping through a new threshold. Thank you.
Well, I
Okay,
think that's all I've got. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
now, if somebody were to ask me about the last symbol, what ray was being influenced or expressed there, I would probably say it was more along the 1357 line. Although there were brilliant displays of yellow and gold, and so there's many rays being expressed there, but the music is dynamic, and to me, it's sort of forceful. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to see an almost identical geometric form, only it's going to be rotating in a different way. And to me, the music I've chosen is more feminine, and the colors that I've chosen to clothe this beautiful circular dodecahedron. And if you look at it carefully, you'll see it has 5 sides. The very center core has five sides. But if you look carefully, that 5 can bleed into a 6-sided figure. And it'll be more obvious as it turns. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do another little mini meditation, only with different music and slightly different geometry, but all based on the same thing. Excellent. Any comments on that video? Did it affect you differently than the other one?
Hi, Duane. This is Rose. I was just waiting for it to like implode and do more. What would you call like a kaleidoscope type thing? But
Yes.
I had to. But that part was in my mind because that's usually you see these things connect from the static, and then they become multidimensional, and so it just brought up that those other images where I've seen of it go into these like a fractal type thing. That's the word I'm looking for. It's like a static fractal.
Excellent. God duplicates him or herself in miniature. And as above, so below. Going into the mystery schools, what is first seen above? Know thyself. By studying the personality and aligning it with the soul, the mysteries are solved because we are the mystery. We're discovering ourselves. We're unfolding out of ourselves. I realize that sounds very mystical, but it's entirely accurate. We're self-generating, self-creating fractal / hologram that if you take any part and analyze it correctly, it becomes an open door to the next symbol, to the next higher level, the next ray or plane influence. Any other comments on this particular animation?
Yeah. Yes, we have a couple, and then hold on a minute, Heidi, okay? Heidi's got her hand up. All right, in answer to your question, was there a difference in the two? Catherine said yes. And then Anna Scalar typed in that these two videos are like evolution of two engine, personality and the soul towards the unifying goal, divinity.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anna.
And then Diana
Beautiful.
says, suddenly one animation within the other. Could we say masculine into feminine and vice versa?
Yes. And if I were to create a mantra, and Michael, if you're still with us, you could create a better one. So feel free to share it. When I look at that compared to the other one, it says, "Come to me," not "I will open you," which is a different kind of energy. It's beckoning you to come into its matrix. And maybe that isn't feminine, but that's how I interpret it. And it has many facets. Any additional comments?
Yeah, Heidi's got her hand up. Go ahead, please, Heidi.
The two things that came to me was the word wonder and water. For me, it looks like water, and on the tips, every tip is a wave. So there's like a point at every tip, but it's being drawn down into the center of, the spiral that's there. So it was very much about water. And of course, water draws everything to itself, right? So
Yes,
um,
excellent.
that's actually how it was showing itself to me, is like water.
One of the things that is easy to lose when you're a child and you go through the educational system, and I promise not to go off on a toot here, but one of the things that I have found by being in too many schools too long is that it it takes out this sense of wonder and awe that we have, or I had when I was at a certain age, and it replaces it with all kinds of cold calculating facts, which are not bad in and of themselves, but if not balanced properly to retain that sense of wonder and awe, it can be very uncomfortable. So this idea of water being fluid, being dynamic, the way a wave, which is circular, forms, is very feminine. And this could actually be seen to me as like an Aquarian chalice, the waters of life pouring forth from every junction. In other words, DK points out that whenever a ray or a plane pass over each other and they're all in a series of triangles, revelation occurs. So what you're looking at here to me is like a cosmic seed. And as we sensitize ourselves towards it and empty our mind of the unnecessary minutia that collects, it can be a doorway. And certainly the 5-pointed star, which is one of the key components of this, and the 6-pointed star are shared with DK in quite a few places, and we will discuss at other presentations. Thank you. Excellent.
And then Dana says second was more fluid, first more invocative.
Yes, there you go. Invocative and fluid. And duality, the interfacing of opposites. Maybe I should create a video that puts these two together. You've given me some creative ideas. Thank you, Dana.
And then Vivian says, today we can see films of the extraordinary tiny creatures, plankton living in the sea, created by water and our planet Earth, all on geometrical designs.
Yes. In physics, you get into these tiny particles, and there's a lot of triangles. That's for another presentation as well. Okay. Any
We have a
additional
hand.
comments? Yeah, Any more
Yeah,
before
we
we
have.
continue?
Um,
Take your
Barbara,
time.
go ahead. Barbara, go ahead, please.
Yes, I saw very much the invitation of the Devas. It seemed to me that it's really shines with co-creation of the human and Devic. But there's a sense that the Devas are giving qualities to this that are beyond the material.
That is a beautiful insight. And I'm reminded of the mystic occultist Gurdjieff, who came at the turn of the century to the West to help bring these ageless wisdom teachings. He has a phrase where he says to his students, let us help co-create with our Father in heaven and lift his burden. And when I first heard that, I thought, wow, how could we, creatures of form, little humanity, how could we co-create to lift the burden of our Father in heaven? And what you have just pointed out prior to this comment with the Davic and angelic kingdoms is exactly true in the case that the reappearance of the Christ will not come alone. He will bring the Deva evolution because they not only purify and are instrumental in the initiatory experience within the individual, but within all groups, within humanity, within the entire planetary life. And people often think that the Devas or the angelic kingdoms are just some sideshow to some other main entrance. But when you realize, and I'm quoting DK here, that there are Devas who have passed through the human evolution in earlier cycles, and they are more advanced than our masters of wisdom in the hierarchy at this time. When the avatar of synthesis on a much higher turn of the spiral assists the Christ and other masters in this reappearance and externalization of the hierarchy, their main healing tool that they wield is the Deva and angelic kingdoms. And up until very recently, the teachings have forbid, to a large degree, interfacing or meditating or aligning with these angelic and Davic kingdoms because they're so powerful. If you haven't done the preparatory work, it could be very upsetting and disorientating. However, since comments that HPB and DK and a lot of others have said 50 or 75 or 100 years ago, there's a whole new wave of humanity who has incarnated, and this is you along with your children, and you will be given the tools to work with the Deva evolution in a new way. And I'll just give you one small example of that. And there are many others working on exactly what I'm outlining. But if you go to my website, I have a book called A Commentary on the Devas, and it lists the ranks, their colors, their numbers, and different invocations that anyone can use, no matter what department they're studying in, whether it's astrology or healing or meditation, and it's there for anyone to explore that. You have to go to my Lightweaver site to find it. But that comment about the Deva and the angels is so important because the moment you're dealing with clarity of color, you're dealing with the Deva evolution. Any additional comments?
Yes, Susie's got her hand up. Please go ahead, Susie. Susie, you're muted. We can't hear you. Susie, did you have a comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm
There we
having
go.
trouble with my lack of technology expertise here. Um, yes, the comment about the burden of light. I'm reminded that Christ also said, "My burden is light," and most of us tend to think of that as meaning that maybe it's going to be okay. I can handle this kind of light, but I've always thought of it as my burden is the light I carry. And so, in reference to what you were just saying, Duane, the more of us who can become light filled do indeed reduce his burden of the light.
This is so true and so beautifully expressed. To quote one of the saints, Saint Elvia, she said, and I cannot remember exactly, we must become the bodies, the eyes, the hands of Christ. We must carry his light so that it's distributed, and it does lessen his burden, but not burden as we understand it. Even the masters struggle for more light. And I understand this is largely incomprehensible, but the moment you distribute through triangles and through your own radiation, particularly in groups like this, but it can happen even in smaller groups, it can happen even in your own family, it lightens your brothers and sisters' load, because we are building the group onto Karana here. We are separate personalities. We make different and unique contributions, but any gain that you make, you bring to your group, and they are the recipients of that, and it lightens their load. So thank you. That was beautiful. Any additional comments before we go to the next slide?
No, only to say that Rose put your website there in the chat. So
Oh, thank you, Rose.
thelightweaver.com, so people can refer to it. So
Without Rose's guidance, spiritually and technically, I would not be able to share with any of you. So thank you, Rose. Okay, we're back to the star of life. And it is very organic, and it's based on, again, the tetrahedron, but you can see it giving birth like a fractal, extending aspects of itself into new regions. And that's what humanity is meant to do in the far distant future, is to, in addition to making and helping the planet become sacred by working under the impression of the Logos, to be able to extend that light to other systems. Maybe Elon Musk isn't so crazy. Maybe deeply embedded in some of his eccentricities is an understanding that one day we will go out and perhaps colonize new planets. I mean, I don't want to get too much into the alien thing, but anything is possible. So all initiation is through the growth and movement of triangles. They can be crisp and clear and have sharp relief corners, contours, or they can be watery. They can be like fluid dynamics. They all serve the same purpose. And we're going to see versions of that coming up in some of the animations where you see a network or a matrix of triangles melt into vortices. Beautiful. Someone like to, this is of course the star of life. And again, through a fractal configuration, it keeps duplicating itself. Just imagine this flat surface that you're looking at curves around and it becomes spherical. And then it's in motion, rotating, palpitating, and it's only one of seven rays or 7 planes. Would somebody like to read the next quote?
Ann Parker, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Triangles as living energy. Owing to the constant movement everywhere, inherent in the solar system and the zodiac, onward, interior, and revolving, some idea can be grasped of the intricacy of the entire pattern. A further aid to the grasping of this essential beauty of coordinated and organized movement and its power to qualify and condition the entire universal pattern can be gained by those students who have studied somewhat the various triangles to be found in the etheric body of man through the interrelation of the 7 centers to which I have referred elsewhere in my various books. These centers, when awakened and alive, are swept finely within the radius of each other's sphere of action. From the point of view of living energy, the circumference of these wheels or vortices of force becomes so enlarged that they eventually overlap and touch.
That is one of the most powerful quotes by the Tibetan on the importance of seeing triangles as living entities. This is how the devas do their magical work. When you do a meditation or alignment and you create a triangle, yes, you have 3 people. They may be operating on different ray levels, but what they're doing is they're circulating these healing devas around the triangle. And as we've demonstrated in other presentations, and maybe we might be able to get into a little here before we close, they become the vortex. The triangle is the vortex in the early stages of its development. Okay, now we're going to see this in animation. We're going to see how triangles propagate. It can start with just one triangle. It can be a half a dozen. But what they do is they keep multiplying and interconnecting and spreading their influence and their light over wider and wider areas. But at a certain point, these triangles become vortices and they become like channels where they're rotating, undulating. So having made that statement, let us take a deep breath, relax, and take a journey into living triangles. Excellent. The Tibetan has affirmed consistently that triangles move in spheres, in currents, in eddies. And I would now open it up to anyone who'd like to make a comment or share.
Duane, I would just like to say that normally when I think of triangles, I think of a straight line, 3 lines, very angular. But this last video you just showed, everything was like rounded and, like you were just saying, spherical. And that's not the typical way that I traditionally view a triangle. I usually view it as angular. So it's very nice to see that that blend of the angular fusing with the roundedness and the spherical.
Excellent. That is a beautiful insight.
I don't see any other comments or hands up at this time.
Okay.
Wait a minute. They were just typing.
Yeah.
Anna or Anna says, through the interactions of polarities of soul and body, sacred and non-sacred planets, lower and higher centers, we create the portal for spiritual energy to enter and direct. In faith, we are to offer ourselves a willing sacrifice as we surrender willful understandings to the guidance of the Master Shepherd.
Beautiful. That was excellent. Equally poetic as it was occultly exact. Thank you so much, Anna. Any additional comments?
No, I don't see any.
Okay. Now we're going to sort of ground out some of this robust energy that we've generated as a group. And we're going to sort of look at this microcosmically. You know, I went through the Tibetan's works at one point, and I found that there was 128 references to the vortex and the funnel. And this quote is taken from I think what the Tibetan calls his first esoteric meditation to his disciples from one of the Dina books. And he's describing this series, well, this triangle that the energy circulates from the 12 petal lotus, the ajna center, the heart, and it rotates counterclockwise. But he says, and this is the last part of the quote, this is in reality more in the nature of a funnel of reception than a triangle. This is one of the great revelations that every person has to have, that only so much can be communicated with words. Only so much can be communicated even with symbols. But symbols are assimilated 10 times faster than words. Psychologists, neuroscientists have proved. And the information is retained 10 times as long. Everything must be mastered through the eye. Okay, so what you see here is you see a triangle. But superimposed over it, you see a cone or a funnel or a vortex. I want the group to imagine that when they make a triangle, that the actual geometric triangle that you start with will move into a field of energy that will be conical, spherical, and that's when the foundation of the visualized triangle is superimposed over with the actual energies themselves. Now, I hope I used the right words here, because this is a sort of where we go from the technical aspect of a triangle to motion. The vortex is rotating. So when you're doing your triangles, you are setting in motion the rotation of ray and or plane energies. And you don't always have to know these technicalities that I'm pointing out here to make this work. But DK says that as the age of Aquarius matures, there will be a new science that will replace what he called the mystical interpretation of the past. And I think this is one of the small contributions in that direction. And let's flip to the next image. Now, what you're looking at here is simply 3 cones or 3 vortices. Now, it can be a little confusing because I'm not showing that these vortices are really inlets and outlets. You got the masculine inlet at the top in a sphere, and then you have the feminine inlet at the bottom where it curls around and goes back to the top. So this can be a little disarming right here, but what we're trying to present is you have 3 vortices. You have the monad, which is the major vortice. It sends out a splinter of light and creates on the causal level, on the high mental plane, the soul body, which is a vortex. And then the soul sends down these triple 3 threads, which this is really the Antakarana oversimplified here, the 3 threads that ground themselves in the physical, etheric, the astral, and mental. And there's 3 triangles that precipitate this, but these 3 triangles veil 3 vortices. And what I've added into this is also the chakra centers. You'll see in each one of these cones, superimposed over the triangle is a lotus. And they're not meant to represent any particular lotus, just that, and I can perhaps explain this using a quote from the Tibetan, from Letters in Occult Meditation. In the whirling of the force through the vortex, which whirling forms the petals of the lotus, it will be observed that certain petals predominantly stand out. So here's a case where the Tibetan is actually saying these whirling forms, that have petal formations come out of the vortex. So if we reverse that process, because DK is just described from above down, and let's hypothetically say we're creatures of form, so we're down here trying to work our way up and out, the geometry, and it's not just a triangle, it's any geometric form, is usually formed on the 3 lower subplanes of the planes and the 3 subrays of the rays. And I apologize if this is getting a little obscure. Just keep in mind that it's sort of like, if you can imagine rain falling from the sky and it's malleable. Imagine that spiritual life, that spiritual energy. When it comes down into the material plane and it hits the what we call the occult cold or restrictions of the material plane, what does this rain turn into? An infinite variety of snowflakes, each one unique, each one expressing some aspect of what came down from above. And that is what happens when you look from above down. You go from these fiery conduits or rivers of Davidic life and light. And as they come down through, they begin to crystallize and solidify. Okay. Imagine those vortices that I just shared as the center component of these different spheres, each one nesting one within the other. And I realize this is a big stretch, but this is sort of a takeoff and a more expanded version of what you just saw on the previous image. The only problem is I have incorrectly put the plus and minus, which I have to correct. And why is that? Because each plane or ray sphere, of which there's 7 of each, and then there's 7 subplanes of each, they have to be in polarity. In other words, if you can see my cursor, plus is where the energy pours in, minus is where the energy exits, circles back around, and then comes back through, each time gaining the experience for having gone through the trip. However, the next one is just the opposite. And that's how they, through polarity, interface positive, negative, positive, negative. These would be like 5 rays or 5 planes. But to show the interface of the rays and planes, they would be positive, negative, positive, negative. Okay. Sorry for becoming a little overly technical. Okay, the cone of fire is the vortex. And DK, in a quote, is talking about the portal of initiation. He says, from out of that cone of fire echoes from its heart, swift to his ears, a voice that said, behold the place of God. From out of the cone of fire, a note fell on his ear that touched a chord within his breast and awakened quick response. So what we're doing here is we're demonstrating how the Tibetan, in many of his works, describes the vortex and the funnel and how rays are connected. So what we see here, we see triangles connecting the outer walls of the sphere, and you could imagine energy, like we've seen in earlier videos, pouring down through the throat, the cone. Okay, here's another one, a slight variation. Shambhala is that would be the little bright light line in the center is what would be designated as the thread of Foha. It is what comes out of its funnel on an even higher level, maybe the cosmic mental plane. I'm just sort of guessing here. And as it descends, it creates rings of lesser potency, all electrical, and they keep duplicating themselves as this thread of Fohat passes down through the lower planes. Okay. Now, this is probably a better demonstration of much of what I've just shared. And here you have the monad, the pouring down and impacting or expressing the 7 rays. There's the thread of Fohat again, the little white with the sort of curving red, very thin line that goes right down into what we could call the eye of the monad. And through that eye, through that pupil, occultly understood, is grounded all the other rays. If you look at that, you'll see at the very center where the monadic cone comes down, it's red, ray 1, blue, ray 2, green, ray 3, ray 4, 5, 6, and 7 with their respective colors. Now, note that when this monadic energy is grounded first through the soul and down through the personality level, that when it ends in the 7th ray, which you can see here at the bottom of this eye, you can see the beginning formation of triangles. And then they solidify into inorganic matter, which of course we know is not inorganic. It's also alive, but we use that term because it's so inert that that nothing seems to be happening. It's evolving so slowly. So are there any questions about this particular composition? Because it summarizes a lot of things I've just shared. How things come down, and they come down in a vortex. Then the vortex has an inlet and outlet, and then all the rays can be expressed almost like onion skins. Any comments or questions?
I don't see anything yet. Everybody, there we go. Hand. Barbara, please go ahead.
So there's a great deal of geometry in this, and the geometry appears to create certain containers so that the shapes hold. So I wonder if you would say something about that process of how these shapes are formed.
That is a beautiful question, and I'm going to throw it out to the group after I just throw a few crumbs onto the banquet that we're all sharing. DK, and it's a quote, says that God geometrizes. He also says that second ray types are more drawn to geometry because of their ray makeup. Now, every living entity is made up of 3 primary rays or influences: ray 1, ray 2, and ray 3. The 4 lesser rays are synthesized by ray 3, so let's just go with these 3 primary rays. When you look at this sphere, imagine ray 1, which is unseen, unrecognized because it's Fohat, is coming down and it's penetrating the lower levels. The circle is the container. That's the third aspect of deity. In white magic, you cannot ground high spiritual energy that's formless unless you create some kind of chalice or container for it to fit into, which is totally inadequate, but I really don't know what other words to use. They're all made of energy, but they're made of 3 different types of energy. And the middle principle would be like the rays themselves. That would be the Christ or consciousness aspect. First ray monad, second ray consciousness, and then the outer periphery of this sphere is where it's all held in a place of tension. If you go and study white magic and alchemy, you'll come across hundreds and hundreds of all kinds of intricate engravings and symbols of all different types. And this is one of the key things they're trying to represent. But all they had at that time, because they didn't have science and they didn't have technology that helped them, all they could do was try to draw it crudely with known images of phoenix and flowers and this and that. And they were good and they worked historically. But now they will be superimposed with a whole new series of more scientific presentations. Okay, any additional comments? The eye of deity. Your single eye acts as the eye of the soul and the monadic eye. And when all three eyes are adjusted and linked together, this is when revelation occurs.
Heidi's got her hand up. Please go ahead, Heidi.
I just wanted to add that that's really what you were indicating in those triangles when you were a few slides ago when you had the triangles stacked. For me, that's the alignment, is that these triangles become aligned within a spherical shape or a vortex shape, and it holds itself together because it knows that it's part of the same principle mechanics of the universe, and it's working through that. And when there's not, when things become out of balance or out of alignment, those triangles can't line up and they don't create this spherical form where the energy can flow directly through all of its layers. And it hums, it creates a humming sound. And that humming sound to me is what holds it together. So that if we went back to the mantra of Aum, it's that hum that vibrates it, and it's moving. I mean, we're looking at a static form, but it's not static. It's always moving, and it's always readjusting itself in accordance to what is occurring on other spheres. So it's like beyond what we can see, but and then it comes into form, and then beyond what we could see, and then it comes into form, and it's constantly oscillating, and it's teaching itself through these forms and shapes, which for me is what life is about. But anyway, that's all I have.
That's excellent. That's a wonderful contribution. All occult spheres, which is the ultimate form of all living spiritual forms, they throb and they palpitate. At first, they palpitate to the in and out breathing of the soul, and then later on a monadic level to the in breathing and out breathing and the palpitation of our planetary logos, who is in turn receiving her inspiration from the solar logos. And they're all lined up to the degree that they can acclimate themselves to the degree that they've been trained to align, so that there's continuity of consciousness from the very highest to the very lowest. There is a statement that the Tibetan makes only once in all of his many volumes, and it describes beautifully what you've just shared. He said, you cannot undergo initiation until you striate the mental field. And striate, the most generic interpretation of striate is like parallel. If you've ever studied electricity, you'll find that electricity is in these little electron packets, and that when they're all sort of scattered and at random. Electricity cannot pass through that medium, piece of wood, water, but it passes through beautifully through something like gold, silver, and copper, because the basic constituency of that is that all the electricity is aligned in striated form. So to get back to what you just outlined, divine geometry is being able to take that which is scattered or misused and putting it in its proper alignment or geometric form. Every person who's participating in this presentation, according to the Tibetan, has a certain geometry. You came in with it from previous lifetimes, and you will go out with a certain geometry, plus an additional beauty and additional appendages and complexity and beauty of that geometric form. So there's some really basic and practical insights here from a lot of somewhat obscure teachings that the Tibetan has given, and said that a lot of it wouldn't even really be understood until the turn of the century, which of course is what we're into now. Okay. So any additional comments?
Yes, go ahead, Michael.
Okay, we're talking about circles, and if we consider a circle as being an infinite number of triangles, creating that figure, we can extend that to the sphere being an infinite number of circles, of triangles. And the triangle, when we consider coming from source being a figure of life consciousness, so that circle, that sphere, is composed of an infinite number of life consciousness forms.
Excellent. Yes, it comprises the all. And DK has said the circle symbolizes the will of the Father, the triangle, the love of the Son, the consciousness, and the square, the material manifestation or field of experience that these higher entities will use or seek to save through the law of sacrifice. Excellent, Michael. Thank you. Any
Thank you.
additional comments?
Not at this point.
Okay, so we're going to just quickly look at this. The door of initiation is in reality an opening, a door leading somewhere, a way of escape, a place through which the soul imprisoned in the body can emerge and pass into higher states of consciousness. It has also been called the funnel or channel for the sound. It has been named the trumpet through which the escaping AUM can pass. The door of initiation is a vortex, and you cannot pass into or through it until the substance in your three lower bodies of the physical, etheric, astral, and mental are vibrating in some degree of unity with what you're about to pass through. And that's why purification is so important, because if your lower vehicles are not purified sufficiently, it would be a very uncomfortable thing to really have the soul light in its power and full vibrancy overshadow you. Okay, so let's look at another way of looking at, okay,
Dwayne,
we got cut off here.
sorry.
Sorry, any questions?
Yeah. Anna says superimposition of the heart center and the soul activate the ajna center, become the portal for monadic energy. 12 times 3 equals 36, which is the active spiritual aura.
Awesome. And 3 and 6 are 9, which is a symbol of perfection. Thank you, Anna. That was excellent. So here's a quote by the Tibetan, and it's sort of interesting because it's in the Antakarana studies, which are incredibly important to outline what you have to do in the stages you're going to go through, how it's going to be done. But then a couple pages later, he says, the symbology of the Antakarana tends badly to complicate the grasp of its real nature. May I remind you that just as the soul is not a 12-petal lotus floating around in mental substance, but is in reality a vortex of force or 12 energies held together by the will of the spiritual entity, the monad on its own plane. This is one of the earlier diagrams, I think done by Keith Bailey quite a while back, that was taken from probably Cosmic Fire. And it shows the coloring of the different petals. And I'm presenting this just to show you the evolution where Michael and Tulia took that, and many of you may have participated in his wonderful work of studying the different petals of the egoic lotus and actually designating what were the qualities that needed to be developed as a personality to reach this higher level and to facilitate this unfolding. Okay, now we're coming close to the end, so I have just a couple more videos, but this is the same egoic lotus without any text that you're now looking at. It's not something I thought it should look a certain way. I took it directly from Michael and Keith Bailey, and I just simply twirled it in Adobe Photoshop. The next image is the same image, only rotated at high speed in Adobe Photoshop, stopping it, getting a still picture of it. So there you go from the egoic lotus that we've been studying to what it might look like by the master who sees us on the inner planes. Or when we have an expansion of consciousness, we might see light, hear a sound. In fact, I doubt there's anybody in this group who hasn't heard sounds and seen light, because if you didn't, you probably wouldn't be here. Now, that's not to say you can't progress and evolve and not experience those two things. Some people experience heat, vibration in the centers. So I have to be careful not to dogmatize how people are going to experience things. But what we're going to do next is we're going to see the egoic lotus in full rotary motion as an animation. So if there aren't any questions or comments, we'll just go right into the next animation. Okay, take a deep breath, relax, and imagine you're on the causal level experiencing your egoic lotus, which will be tinged by more of one color than another because of your soul's ray.
svan Tatsavitu vareniam Bargo devasya dimahi Dio yona prachodaya
I apologize for the short length of that, but it's something that's a work in progress. Anyone like to share?
I don't see
Okay,
anything yet.
excellent. Then what we're going to do is, if there aren't any additional questions or shares, we're going to end this presentation a few minutes early. And
I have one question, Duane.
okay,
What are it says in the earlier quote, it said that there were 12 streams of energy that pour into the soul petals, the egoic lotus petals. Can you elaborate a little bit on those 12 streams of energy? Is I'm familiar, or do they have a correspondence to the 7 rays, or are they different? Just help clarify that a little bit for me. Thank you.
well, that's a very good question, and I don't know the answer. I think that maybe the 12 astrological forces have potentially a bearing on each egoic lotus, but also somewhere I recall Michael Stacy, you could feel free to chime in here because you're been studying these teachings with Michael forever and probably still are, even though he's out of incarnation, just to show how continuity goes on. Yeah, the 7 and the 5, and something to do with the creative hierarchies. But if there's anybody who would like to chime in, feel free to do it. That's a great question, Rose.
I think you'll also find that there is a particular energy, using that term loosely, with each subplane of each plane.
Yes, this is a good insight. Thank you, Michael. Okay. We're going to have one more quote from the Agni Yoga series. And what we're going to read here, who would like to volunteer to read this? Just parallels so perfectly everything that we're talking about. Okay,
I can read it.
thank you.
Urasvati saw the so-called Wheel of Buddha. This is actually the Telrath of the far-off worlds. Its essence is contained in the foundation of the universe, which may be seen as a pestle. At its end, sorry, my eyes are playing with me. At its ends are the spheres of polarity corresponding to the 2 basic laws. At the center is the swastika, the like wheel of psychic energy, and the circle of whirling rainbow is the manifestation of all stages of spatial fire. Knowing this is a step toward the mastery of fire. By visualizing this structure, the approach of fire can be evoked and its dangerous essence transformed into a healing property.
Thank you. Excellent. By focusing on it, this is a step towards the mastery of fire. Fire can be evoked through this symbol. very, very powerful and parallels what we're outlining here through the majority of the Tibetan's teachings. So I'm going to skip through a little because we're got a whole bunch. Okay, here we go. Okay, now, if there aren't any further comments, we're going to close with our triangle meditation that we've used several times before. And I would like the group to feel that they are empowered, that they can draw off of the group's strength, its light, its love, and its ability to heal at this time on a planetary level. And during this short video, just see the light from this group and from yourself pouring out and reaching any troubled areas in the world or on the planet. And without focusing on any particular person, just let your fiery flames of energy or your triangles or your spheres or your vortices, whatever works for you, whatever you feel most comfortable with, and see these healing energies pouring down and these different warring groups receiving this gift, because this is part of the law of sacrifice. You have taken your busy time to come together and to embody this group with energy and force it could not embody on its own. So taking a deep breath, relaxing.
Tatsaviturvarenyam Bargo devasya dhimahi Dhiyo yona prachodayat Om Bhurvuvah Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bargo devasya dhimahi Dhiyo yona prachodayat Om Bhurvuvah Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bargo devasya dhimahi Dhiyo yona prachodayat.
Excellent. If there aren't any further comments, we will close.
Thank you, everyone. And you got a lot of thank yous in
Thank you.
the chats for your beautiful presentation. And as Michael has put in the comments there, we will put the individual videos that Duane had shown, so you can look at them separately, as we have
Excellent.
been doing all along. So the next Awakening the Higher Mind will be on the 13th of January. So everybody have a lovely, lovely holiday season.
Yes, filled with light and love and joy. Love you all.
The world around, light and joy and love. Let's visualize that all across the world. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you all.